If you've ever felt guilty for needing space, for having boundaries, for wanting to have a boundary, for not texting back fast enough, for choosing yourself in a relationship or a friendship, then this episode is going to be for you. So I had a request in my membership for content about guilt and anxious attachment. And it's something that I didn't think I had a lot of until I realized how many of my choices were shaped by trying to make up for something or trying to do the right thing or do something the right way. And so many of us with anxious attachment are almost walking around with this invisible backpack of guilt, constantly checking in or thinking or wondering, did I hurt them? Did I say it wrong? Did I do enough? Are they thinking something bad about me? Did I do it wrong? But there's something that no one probably told you about guilt, which is that a lot of guilt you feel may actually not be yours. It's learned, it's inherited, it's conditioned or internalized. But again, for those with anxious attachment, this guilt can often be like a background hum in our nervous system. So we don't just feel guilty when we actually really mess up. We feel guilty for needing or taking up space or pulling away or, choosing one social event over another one. Or we feel guilty if we feel like we want to ask for more or saying no or even thinking about saying no. And so often this kind of guilt isn't really based on truth. It isn't really reality-based guilt. It's based in a nervous system that learned that love had to be earned through performance or perfection or peacekeeping. And as I've mentioned in some other episodes, when we have anxious attachment, we tend to really put our energy outside of ourselves, and our concern is much more on the other and the experience of the other than it is on ourselves. And in a balanced way, that can be so beautiful. And if our whole world operated that way, with balance and with still having the priority of filling our own cup first, it really would probably make the world a much better place. But instead, we're doing this from a place of fearing that we're going to be wrong or we're going to do something wrong or hurt someone. And then it's actually really disorienting for our system because our energy and our awareness is outside of us. So of course, we end up not feeling connected to who we are and not feeling grounded. And that's a bit of a side tangent, but I want to keep this on the track of guilt. So just from a psychological perspective, what is the emotion of guilt? Guilt is often a signal from our psyche that we've done something that goes against our values or the values we've been conditioned to hold. So there's two kinds of guilt. There's true guilt and there's false guilt. And true guilt is just that healthy moral compass alert system. So when we've genuinely acted out of integrity, genuinely done something where we know, that's not really who I am. Maybe I'm super tired and I'm passive aggressive to my partner, or maybe I'm passive aggressive to a stranger. And I know that if I did that in that moment, I would have this backlash of, ooh, that didn't feel good. That's not me. I'm sorry. That just is not who I am. We can also feel that sort of, I think backlash is the right word. For me, it's sometimes cutting corners and stuff. Like I kind of do something 80% of the way, and then I'm like, oh, I feel bad that I didn't do it the whole way because it's not who I am, So it was more a product of stress or lack of capacity, and that's true guilt, right? That's true guilt. That's showing me what's aligned with me, and it allows me to also change my behavior because I'm learning from that response. False guilt is internalized from different systems. So from religion, from culture, from family, from society. And often with false guilt, we're carrying just this feeling of wrongness, even when we've done nothing wrong. And I actually have another episode that's called Healing the Wound of Wrongness, I think. So that could be one to dive into if this part is specifically landing for you. But what we want to explore here is potential inherited guilt. So inherited guilt could come from our mothers, especially around boundaries and needs. We often watch mothers be so self-sacrificing to the point of literally making themselves unwell, stressed, sick, autoimmune conditions because they're so giving so past their boundaries, so unsupported, unresourced. So we feel like we have to do that because that's what our mother did. There's also sort of a external pressure to be good as women. And that is so vague. So we've all created our own story in our mind of what it is to be a good woman, right? And that can create this sort of chronic low-grade guilt for even existing fully, because to exist fully as a human, but as a woman, is a huge range. Wow, the range of the feminine is everything. Every expression, we can think of it as different archetypes. We have the maiden expression of the woman, which is like the playful, flirty, the virgin is the maiden, these different archetypes. And we have the mother, devoted, nourishing, the queen, responsible, like leader. So when we have this story that we have to be a certain way, it usually is cutting off one of those ends of expression. Either we don't want to be too masculine or too direct or too bitchy or whatever the story is, or we don't want to be too playful, too soft, because that's weak. When actually every human has the ability to be and sort of play in all of those different realms. And the more that we can feel safe in that different expression, the less we have this sense of, oh, I'm wrong for wanting to be one way, because since you are capable of all of it, it might all feel desirable at different points in your life. You might have a desire to really be in your sensuality and sexuality. But if we have a story that that's too much, then now we have to be small about it, feel guilty about it. So I'm giving you this example, one, to paint examples of false guilt and societally induced guilt. And also, as I'm saying it, next month in the membership, so it will be on April 3rd or 4th, I would have to look, April 3rd, we're going to do a full class on the feminine range and the feminine archetypes. So again, bit of a side tangent here, but that's coming up in just a few days. So if that stands out to you, then definitely come join us in the membership for that. So just to tie it back here, where does the guilt come from? Like we said, it can be family, religion, culture, society, but something to think about might be, if guilt has this voice in your head, who does it sound like? So this guilt voice can sometimes sound very policing, structured, bossy, very specific. And if you just think about it for a moment, does that sound like anyone specific? And maybe it does, and maybe it doesn't. But if it does, then we can start to see where we're giving a lot of power to an adult from our past, or a teacher, or a friend even. Where is this voice coming from? We can also explore things like childhood dynamics. What were we expected to do and how we were expected to be? Were we made to feel responsible for others? If we were expected or made to regulate our parents' emotions, or be responsible for our younger siblings from an age that was probably a little bit too young, then it's likely going to manifest in feeling guilty for not wanting to have responsibility, feeling guilty for not doing enough, feeling guilty for not taking care of people enough, while at the same time another part of you is saying, I just want to be alone. I just need rest. I just I need stronger boundaries, whatever it is. So we end up having this inner conflict with a part of us that knows we have needs and boundaries that we want to honor, and then this voice of guilt that's usually saying it's not enough, or what if you do that wrong, or what if you hurt them, or however it shows up for you. So something else that I wanted to bring in is the concept of shame, because sometimes shame and guilt get a little paired together or a little mixed together. And so I want to use Brené Brown's teaching, because she makes this really clear and powerful distinction between guilt and shame, which is guilt says, I did something bad, and shame says, I am bad. So she describes guilt as adaptive and helpful. And that's what I was saying before about true guilt. So it's a signal that aligns us with our values and encourages us to make a change. And it can lead to growth and healing. So definitely not all guilt is bad. It's our moral compass, right? Whereas shame is destructive. Shame saying, like we said before, shame, I am bad, it corrodes our sense of self and it leads to disconnection. It usually leads to us isolating ourselves, to pushing these parts of ourselves that we feel shame around into the shadow, leads to hiding. It's very disempowering. Can also manifest as really intense perfectionism. So she has some really good reframes around this, and I'm going to just keep going with her teachings here for a minute. So as she said, guilt is tied to behavior, but shame is tied to identity. So when we have a healthy sense of guilt, we are more likely to change our behavior because we can see that it's an action separate from who we know we are. And that gives us room to grow. But if we are in shame, which is I am worthless or I am bad, then we tend to collapse into self-hatred. And the reason that I want to bring these two up is because guilt is something that we can be very proactive with, and shame is something that needs a totally different sort of healing, which we are going to get to. Guilt, as another benefit or another gift, is an emotion in some ways that helps us stay connected. So it's part of what allows humans to feel remorse and then repair relationships. If we had no sense of guilt or ability to apologize or take responsibility for actions in relationship, then we probably wouldn't be able to repair a relationship, right? Which would also be very isolating, really could lead to hurting other people. So in that sense, guilt can be this really beautiful signal that we care, right? I'm just willing to apologize. But when we internalize guilt over things that just aren't ours to carry, like childhood roles or this conditioning or codependent dynamics, then it becomes a burden and not a guide or a compass. And this client who had specifically asked me to talk about guilt, she mentioned the word self-forgiveness. So self-forgiveness is usually blocked by shame, but not by guilt. So someone might say they feel guilty, or you might think that you feel guilty, but you're actually experiencing shame. And if that's what we're experiencing, then healing likely isn't going to happen because it's not about making amends. It's actually more about believing how worthy you still are of love after the fact of the behavior or whatever it was. So if you have tried to forgive yourself for something that felt like it induced guilt in the past, but it still feels stuck, then maybe what we're carrying isn't actually guilt, it's shame. And what shame needs is not fixing or blaming or behavior change. The behavior change will come from the guilt, but shame needs gentleness. Shame needs presence, understanding, patience, compassion. So it's a bit of a different healing process, as you can feel, because as I said before, shame tends to be hidden away. We don't want to acknowledge it. We don't want to feel it. And so when something is hidden away in our own shadow, you can sort of imagine that there's this part of you that's kind of curled up in the dark, alone. And what they probably really, really need is a light and love brought there. And as I said, understanding and gentleness. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a different perspective for what angle we might need to take when we are experiencing these emotions, and also allows you to sort of sense the difference between shame and guilt. Because what we're all learning to do here is really master our emotional regulation, which means mastering a deep understanding of who we are. And so we do have to explore all the emotions in depth. We do have to explore anger and potential anger suppression. We do have to explore our relationship to sadness, also our relationship to joy and elation and playfulness. And when we can feel safe in all of them, including guilt, including shame, that's when you will feel more whole, more in control, more connected to yourself, more held, because you are able to hold yourself through this whole range of expression that, again, we all have. So coming back again to guilt and anxious attachment. Anxious attachment, as we know, often comes from childhood environments where love was inconsistent, or where we had to earn our love by being good or helpful or available or emotionally attuned. So with that, we might internalize some beliefs that sound like, if I take up space for myself, I'm selfish or I'm bad. If someone else is upset, it's probably my fault. If I don't show up perfectly, I will get in trouble or I will be abandoned. And it's these beliefs in the nervous system that can trigger this chronic false guilt for things that literally aren't wrong at all, like saying no, or not replying right away, or just having needs, or needing reassurance, or wanting more from a relationship. And the problem with this false guilt and feeling guilty for these things that you know probably on some level in your adult mind are not wrong is it keeps us over apologizing when we've done nothing wrong. And that over apologizing can sometimes make other people be like, wait, am I missing something? Like, did you do something bad that I don't know about? It can also make us just stay silent to avoid potentially upsetting someone else. We feel like we are too much just for existing, or we take a lot of responsibility for others. We might find ourselves apologizing for growing or changing or wanting more, like I said, but this kind of guilt is not intuitive guilt. It's not moral compass guilt. It's just your inner child who is trying to stay safe. Your inner child who's saying, oh, I don't know about this. We might get in trouble for this. Am I bad for this? Because of these internalized beliefs. And now, when we're trying to outgrow this, when we start healing and learning about our boundaries and wanting to honor them, sometimes that guilt gets louder before it gets quieter. Not because we're doing something wrong, but because we're finally disobeying these old rules, quote, rules that kept us safe. And that can be really scary for the nervous system. But in this case, it doesn't mean you're bad. It actually just means you're becoming someone new, and you need to alchemize this emotional experience that keeps happening through creating safety in the body. So let's talk about healing this pattern of false guilt. Obviously, it doesn't mean you become cold or uncaring, right? It doesn't mean that you care any less. It means that you're learning to trust your boundaries, even if someone else doesn't like it. It means letting go of needing to over-explain your choices. It means feeling that pull of guilt that might come up, a false guilt, and choosing to just trust yourself anyway. And eventually something very magical happens, because on the other side of releasing all false guilt, which is probably 99% of the guilt that we feel, it's this freedom. You just don't even feel bad anymore. It doesn't feel like something you should feel bad for, because you have finally created a harmony with your subconscious mind and your conscious mind that knows that it's okay to say no, that knows that it's okay to have needs. And you just trust that so fully that there is no part of you questioning anymore, is this person going to be mad at me? And when you have that kind of freedom, then you have this clear ability to rest without explaining, to receive without apologizing, to speak your needs without bracing for punishment or without needing to, again, over-explain. You can walk away from patterns or people that don't fit without making yourself be bad or feel bad about it. And it's this rewiring in the body to feel safe with the truth that you're already enough, that you are good, that you don't need to shrink or perform or suffer in order to be loved, that we really explore and uncover and work with also in the membership. So if this conversation has stirred something in you and you're realizing how much of your life has been shaped by guilt that maybe was never yours to carry, then I've created a deeper integration for you in this topic inside the membership. So that integration, which is in the membership, it's like part 2 of this podcast, let's say the actual work part, that has some journal prompts. It has a somatic practice to explore guilt in the body and in the subconscious, and to be able to create safety. We're going to talk a little bit more about self-forgiveness and releasing what's not yours. So you can find that in the membership portal super easily. If you can't find it easily, I will certainly help you in there. And it's really important that we do these deeper layer works, because guilt isn't just mental. If you could just mentally talk yourself out of it, you probably would have done that already, right? It's emotional, it's somatic, it can even be ancestral. So that is your invitation to explore and release and rewire this guilt, especially the kind that was never yours to carry. You'll also have me in the membership supporting you every step of the way, whether you're doing the guilt healing integration or any of the other 50 exercises and guided somatic practices that are in there. Plus, we have 2 live calls a month, including a Q&A coaching call, so you can bring whatever is coming up for you in terms of anxious attachment, relationships, triggers, boundaries, needs, communication into that call, and they are always so fruitful. So the link for the membership is in the show notes. I hope to meet you and be able to support you inside, and I'd also love to hear from you if you listened to this episode and what resonated with you. So I'm going to put my Instagram handle in the show notes as well. Please DM me, say hello. I'd love to know who's on the other end and the receiving end of these podcasts. Thank you so much. Take care. I'll talk to you soon.